the Atlantic provinces as it pertains to healthcare in particular. And I feel that we do have it on the record from the Minister, and I do appreciate the support that I got from my provincial and territorial colleagues to continue to focus that on need. So I take it from that we can expect the same allocation in the next 3 years as we received in the past, but it is an area where there's sorely need of more attention. Last year we were able to assist about 1,000 homeowners.
Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to maybe more specifically try to find out how much money does the Western Regional Housing Office in Milton have to spend on RAP programs and other social housing programs. So could the Minister indicate how much funding does the Valley Regional Office have for social housing programs?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I would just want to confirm that I think the member is asking for a good deal more than the RAP program. And we will endeavour to get that information for the honourable member. But it certainly would be nice if there was a larger RAP component for all the regional housing authorities or housing services offices.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank and I welcome the Minister's commitment to provide us with that information. Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, and I'm sure the Minister is fully aware, of the waiting list for people applying for assistance with household repairs. We are, I guess, I would say constantly told by a lot of people, because I know there's a lot of people, not just in my constituency, in our county, but across the province that really depend on these housing programs. I'm just curious if it's possible to find out, because this is quite often an answer that these individuals are being provided. Right now, there's not enough funding, or the funding has been spent on the existing programs, and these individuals are put on waiting list. So when new funding becomes available, then of course more applications will be processed. I guess I'm trying to find out, is it possible, I don't want the list of who is on the waiting list, but at least some general idea in terms of how much of a backlog is there on these waiting lists? Are we looking at a few? Are we looking at many hundreds or thousands even? So could the Minister indicate, in terms of waiting lists, on these programs, what kind of waiting lists do exist?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the members opposite for an excellent question. And in fact, this was really the Nova Scotia case that I carried forward last week in Winnipeg. It was Wednesday of last week, and the whole concern about not going to per capita funding revolves around your concern, because the waiting list is far too long already. And in Nova Scotia, the percentage of homes that are in need of major repairs that would qualify for RAP is 15%. Well, nationally, it's 8%. So you can imagine how devastating it would have been to those homeowners that are already waiting far too long to come to the head of the queue if we'd gone to per capita funding. And again, I was very appreciative that my provincial and territorial counterparts accepted that argument, and I feel that I got the assurance from the federal minister in the minutes that they would not be going to per capita. But that does not answer the member's question. That just assures the member that we are aware, and perhaps this minister is aware, that we don't want the lists to get any longer. But as long as I'm talking about Winnipeg, the member opposite would welcome some news, but he would also, I think, recognize the same concerns that I had about this. As part of the review process, they were planning on doing some things like eliminate the $6,000 loan requirement for RAP applications. If, in other words, you can get up to 12,000, and then you can borrow another 6. Well, the problem is with the other 6 is that some of the applicants are not in a position to make any loan payments, and as a result of that, they're looking at raising it to 18,000. Which is good news if you happen to qualify, but if you happen to be on that waiting list and your situation is not as urgent as perhaps the person that's at the head of the list, you may not welcome that news because it means that you're going to be pushed that much further back. And this is one of the things that I brought forward to the federal minister and his Secretary of State, expressing concerns that this type of announcement is going to greatly increase the public's expectations, and unless commensurate amount of funding is made available to augment the existing budget, that the waiting lists would grow disproportionately longer. So the member and I, the honourable member and I, share these concerns, and basically we're looking at years depending on where you are on the list. Basically, emergency repairs go to the top of the list. I can relate entirely with what the honourable member is sharing with me, because I know the honourable member does good constituency work, and I can say that because I know that he writes me letters expressing concerns about his constituents, and it's a good reflection on the honourable member. I would tell the honourable member I've encountered some of the same frustrations. Recently this winter, during the start of the cold snap, I had a constituent whose chimney blew down, and without the chimney, it meant that they were depending on a little heater, and I could go on about all the complications of trying to heat a house with an electric heater when it's minus 20 out. But in this case, through the emergency repair program, they did fix the chimney. But by fixing that chimney, it may mean that somebody else has to wait longer because their repairs were not deemed to be an emergency, although they clearly would qualify for the program. So I guess I'm giving the member opposite some empathy, but maybe not the assurance that the additional monies will be forthcoming in this budget year, although the federal minister was encouraged to please do anything that he could to augment the program, and I would assure him and the honourable member, I assured him and I assure the honourable member that provincially we'll do all we can to put in the provincial 25%.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll be more specific. Is it possible to try to get some numbers in terms of how much money does the Valley Regional Housing Office receive for Provincial Housing Emergency Repair Program? How much money do they receive for Emergency Repair Program?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and with reference to my previous answer, Honourable Member, we'll just try to provide a further breakdown as it pertains to the Western region. And I think you're looking for all the region's budgets. Are you looking for to compare what we're getting in the West with the other parts of the province? I see no reason why you should not have it for all 4 regions.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the minister's commitment to provide us with that information. I just have a couple areas remaining in housing here. The minister earlier today talked about housing units for families. No, Mr. Chairman, in Clare there's a very, very small number of family units available at home. And I heard the minister earlier this morning talking about where there's a housing shortage, that housing provides a rent supplement to help families. And I guess just a quick few questions is, how does one go about getting assistance? Who do you contact for information? And how do you qualify for assistance? So I'll repeat the questions again. How does one go about getting assistance for rent supplement? Who do you contact? And thirdly, how do you qualify?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the member opposite for his question. And actually, member, you will be receiving in your mail, I trust, any time now, this from me with a note from Vicki Fraser, who's in my communication staff. And okay, the member opposite is acknowledging it, and maybe that's the reason why he asked the question. In fact, I wanted all MLAs to have that information so that first and foremost they can be a source of information, but the local housing services regional office would be the place to call in terms of the programs. If you're interested in obtaining affordable housing, you've got the 7 regional housing authorities. And I'm not sure if I've answered the member's question, but I appreciate his allowing me to point out that this is available and has been distributed to all honourable members.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did receive the information, the brochure that the minister has forwarded off to us, and I will be doing a follow-up with the local housing office to get some information and details on that rental supplement. I guess my last question on housing, Mr. Chairman, there's several public housing complex in my riding, and one in particular, the Foyer Gabriel, that's located in Sonyville, and I did forward a letter to the minister. This public housing unit, it's a 2-story. There's, I think, 15 units, 7 on the first floor and 8 units on the second floor. Just recently, there was an 80-year-old lady that broke her foot. Of course, there's only 2 stairway at each end of the building to access the second floor. There's no elevator. I understand there's a couple people that are in their 90s, still in good health, living on the second floor. Actually, the day that I was over, I helped this lady to get down. She had a doctor's appointment that had the broken foot. I can't even start imagining, every time this lady wants to leave, she needs to certainly make some arrangements with some other people and helping to get her down to the first floor. And at the same time, with these 8 residents living on the second floor, every time they have to, bring groceries in or bring stuff upstairs or again downstairs, they have to use the stairs. My question to the minister, is there funding available to help install elevators in senior housing units?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the member opposite for his question, and I do recall him writing me and encouraging me to provide elevator services for Foyer Gabriel. Merci. And the concern here is that we have about 9,000 seniors in 476 buildings throughout Nova Scotia, and where there's mobility problems, we try to put them either on the ground floor or in units that have elevators. But having said that, as time takes its toll, those that may be mobile in a unit that requires the use of stairs when they first go in may not always be, and this may well be the case with the honourable member's constituent. But 85% of them are accessible, either ground accessible or through elevators. We do endeavour, based on need, allocate monies across the province for various renovations, elevators being one, but the vast majority are accessible, and it would cost, I'm advised, $22 million to make it 100% accessible by elevator, and that's a fairly significant sum, and we would probably want to look at the whole stock of affordable housing and other competing demands for housing services in making those determinations.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my final question on housing. With the recent 5-year affordable housing agreement, will there be funding in this new agreement to help these senior complex to maybe access some elevators? I understand that Foyer Gabriel is not the only senior complex in the province without an elevator. So I guess my final question, if maybe the minister knows, maybe he doesn't know, he indicated earlier these recommendations will be forthcoming to his office very shortly, what the priorities will be, where the funding will be spent. So I guess my last question on housing, does the minister have some indication if there will be some money available in this new 5-year agreement to help some of these senior complex install elevators?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I thank the member opposite for his question, and I thank you, Mr. Chair. That was the wish of Housing Services, that there could be some flexibility in those monies, but as I understand it, the agreement that ultimately was signed between the province and the federal government is directed towards new units. And while we welcome the additional housing stock, I concur with the member opposite that it might have been good to have some flexibility there. However, the federal government is putting up 50% of the cost, and that is significant, and we certainly welcome their participation in public housing again, and if they choose to do it by encouraging provinces to build new units, then I think we've got to work with them.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to move to another very vital section of this department. It's about children's services. Mr. Chairman, in 2001, the federal government announced a $2.2 billion agreement over 5 years to fund early childhood development programs. The share for Nova Scotia will be $66 million. I'm wondering maybe if the minister could indicate if this new funding is cost shared or if it's strictly federal funding. And at the same time, does the province have to provide some accountability to the federal government on where exactly this federal funding will be spent in Nova Scotia over those 5 years?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
The answer is yes. The federal government is looking for greater accountability. Yeah. I thank the member opposite for his question. It's a very good question. And I'm going to go to the accountability aspect. The federal government is augmenting provincial monies that are going into family and children's services. The total budget for family and children's services is $148,159,000, which includes a federal component, $15.1 million through the early childhood development initiative that the member is referring to, that my predecessor signed with his federal counterpart. And I would tell the member opposite, or I'd advise the member opposite, that the federal government was not entirely comfortable with the way that all the provinces and territories invested those monies that were provided for them. And as part of the early learning and childcare initiative, which further augments that program, and we've spoken about that earlier, there was a request, there was a condition for greater accountability, and in terms of where the monies could be spent, it had to be in either provincially or territorially regulated programs. So there is an expectation of accountability on the part of the federal government, and I think that there should be, and Nova Scotia is happy to work with them.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this agreement, as I indicated, started out in 2001, 2002. In the first year of the agreement, the province of Nova Scotia received $9.1 million. In the second year, last year, 2002-2003, the province received $12.1 million. Would the minister undertake to provide us with a complete list for the last 2 years where this federal funding has been spent?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
The honourable member would already have page 4.3, which gives a summary. I think he's looking for some greater detail, which is not available to me here today, but staff is making note of the member's request, and we'll endeavour to provide that for him.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the minister provide us with a preliminary list of where this year's funding will be spent? This year, Mr. Chairman, from the agreement, Nova Scotia will be receiving $15 million. So could the minister, I suspect this funding has already been identified throughout the department where the money will be spent. So would the minister provide us with a list of where this year's funding will be spent?
Okay. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
The answer, honourable member, is yes. And I'm advised that, in fact, a full report for previous year's expenditures is at the proverbial printers, and I look forward to sharing that with the honourable member and all interested parties.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the budget estimate, the supplementary detail, page 4.7, under Family and Children's Services. Being aware that the federal government will be spending $15 million this year, I'm just trying to find out where in the budget estimate or what budget line is this funding listed under?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank the honourable member for his question. If he looks at page 4.3, he will see a breakdown of the allocation of the 15.1 plus the 748,000 from the new early learning and child care initiative that was agreed to back in March.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the minister indicate if this is strictly federal funding, this $15.8 million, or is there provincial funding added to the federal funding that will be spent on early childhood development this year?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The funding shown on page 4.3, the $15,848,000 is the federal component of the provincial family and children's services budget of $148,159,000, and so it is set out specifically to answer your question and those that would have the same question.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking for clarification here. In the budget speech that was delivered here early this month on page 19, and I quote, "This year we will add $3.7 million to childcare and early learning initiatives." And my question is this $3.7 million out of the $15.8 million? And if not, where is this new provincial funding listed?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I was just conferring with staff on the previous answer, and I'm wondering if the honourable member would repeat his question.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, in the budget, page 19, in the budget speech that was delivered here earlier this month, it indicates that this year we will add $3.7 million to childcare and early learning initiatives. And my question was, where in the budget is this $3.7 million listed? And at the same time, if this $3.7 million is listed in the federal spending on 4.3, could he clarify where this $3.7 million is listed?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
It is listed under the early learning and childcare programs, but the thing that should be pointed out there is that there was a portion in 2001, 2002 that was not spent, which skewed the expenditures in 2002, 2003. So you have to net that out to determine that, in fact, there was an increase in the budget for 2003, 2004. So I think that's what the honourable member has picked up on, and in anticipation of his next question, perhaps I could provide him the answer ahead of time.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess coming back to the first year, maybe the minister could indicate, under the 5-year agreement, in the first year, there was $9.1 million, right? How much of that funding, or I guess the first question, was that $9.1 million, was that spent entirely in that year, or was there leftovers carried over in the next year? Let's start with $9.1 million.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the honourable member for his question. And because of the timing of the announcement and the appropriate decisions that had to be made to best invest those monies, in fact, only $4,414,800 was spent in the 2001-2000 year, which was carried over, and the balance of the 9.1 million was actually spent in 2002-2003, and that's why it appears to skew the figures. But I want to assure the honourable member that our concern was the provision of the best possible childcare, and time did not allow it to happen all in 2001 and 2002.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the minister for clarifying the funding for the first year of the agreement. I just want to make sure that for the second year of the agreement, 2002-2003, $12.1 million, plus the balance that was carried over from the previous year was spent last year. Could the minister confirm that?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
The short answer, Mr. Chair, is yes. I think if the member opposite was to add the actual and the forecasts, he would find that it comes to $21.2 million, which is in fact exactly the appropriate amount. So for the 2 years combined, it comes up to $21.2 million. If you take the totals down at the bottom, for 2001, 2002, 4.3. So the estimates, which is basically the federal contribution, is 9.1 million plus 12.1 million. So those two added together makes 21.2 million. And then if you look at the actual and the forecast, I think you'll find that it comes up to exactly 21.2 million.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to move on to daycare spaces. A press release that was issued August the 8th, 2002 indicated that $1.6 million in funding for new startups and expansions will go to 22 nonprofit childcare organizations across the province, resulting in more than 400 new full and part-day childcare spaces. My first question to the minister is, how are these 400 new childcare spaces distributed across the province? Do centres have to apply for them, or are they divided up per county or by population base?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member. The various centres would be sending in those applications, and they would be scrutinized by staff, and there's a criteria set up to try to address based on need across the province, and we try to, our staff tries to match the applications with the policy.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these 400 new daycare spaces are divided up based on the need and based on the applications received, and at the same time they had to meet the criteria. Could the minister indicate how many full-time childcare spaces we have in the province, either in commercial or in non-profit centres?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I get a clarification whether you want to know the number of approved full-time childcare spaces or subsidized childcare spaces?
The member for Clare.
My first question here, now I'll come back to the part-time in a minute. My first question is, how many full-time childcare spaces do we have in the province that are being subsidized in commercial or in non-profit centres?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the answer is 2,650.
The member for Clare.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, could the minister indicate to us how many part-time childcare spaces is the government subsidizing around the province? Part-time childcare spaces.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not been given the amount of subsidized spaces, but I can give you the total number of spaces for full-time and part-time, but not as to whether they're subsidized or not. There are 7,966 spaces in the full-day childcare sector. There are 3,700 childcare spaces in the part-day sector.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the minister for providing us with that information. Mr. Chairman, we often hear there's still not enough daycare spaces in our province, subsidized daycare spaces in our province. Does the department have an idea of how many daycare spaces that is needed?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would suggest that we need more daycare spaces, and we also need more subsidized daycare spaces. But in terms of the absolute number, as the member opposite would appreciate, people find all kinds of ways of caring for their children while they're presumably at work, and this is just one answer, but I think clearly there's a demand for more.
The member for Clare.
And I agree with the minister. There's definitely a need for more. I was trying to find out, if the department had some idea in terms of how many more would be needed. Going back to the subsidized seats, how do single moms or low-income families find out where these subsidized daycare spaces are located, and how do they go about accessing these daycare spaces?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, the honourable member has made an excellent point by way of his question, and I suspect he knows well the answer, and that's why he asked the question. Through the Early Childhood Initiative, I believe that we are investing $450,000 this year to provide that sort of information service, in fact, to assist parents in finding suitable childcare for their children.
The member for Clare.
Mr. Chairman, I guess to be more specific, there are single moms, there are low-income families that are in need of these subsidized daycare spaces. My question was, how does one go about finding out where the subsidized seats are located in order to help these families?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been advised that I gave the right number for the new child care resource and referral allocation for this year, but I think what the member is saying, that until that is up and in operation, what does a parent do in the meantime? And to answer the member's question, a parent can approach a child care center and inquire about availability. They're a wonderful source of information in this. They can also approach one of our community services offices for information. But the member is basically highlighting the need for this initiative, and it is a good initiative, and it's good to be working with the federal government to provide that service.
The member for Clare.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple questions on the portable daycare spaces. I'm looking at the Nova Scotia baseline report. I'm looking at page 16 to be specific. It talks about the number of allocated and portable spaces by region. Data was from May of 2001. I'm just wondering, could the minister provide us with current data in terms of how many portable daycare spaces, subsidized portable daycare spaces exist currently in the province?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The answer is 200.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to the budget speech on page 19. I want to talk about the Wood Street Secure Care Facility. On page 19, it says, very soon, Mr. Speaker, the Wood Street Secure Care Facility in Truro will open for young clients who are experiencing severe difficulties. My first question is, how much did the care facility cost?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the question was for the capital cost of building the Wood Street care facility. It's $4 million.
The member for Clare.
My next question, has the project, this project come in on budget as it was planned?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I'm advised that it came in on budget.
The member for Clare.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, this new centre will provide highly specialized care, specialized services for many of our children. There is no doubt having these children closer to their families will be appreciated by all. Once I guess maybe the minister could indicate to us when he anticipates that the centre will open its doors.
The member for Clare. I'm sorry, the Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to advise the member from Clare that it's anticipated that will open in mid-June. I was there a couple of months ago, met the manager, and at that point in time, they were just concluding the process for hiring the clinical services manager. And then at that point in time, the rest of the hiring was going to take place. And of course, that's a critical component of this because it is the staff that obviously make the center. Well, the staff and of course the youth, but the staff is the critical component. And I would advise the member that Mark Doherty, who was hired as the manager, has come from a similar type facility in Saskatchewan, and he strikes me as a wonderful, caring person who's doing this for all the right reasons and has the right attributes and for this job. And I think he's a very good choice for the centre.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the minister indicate to us, once the centre opens in June, how many will we still have some of our children placed outside of the province for care?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The difficulty in answering that question is that it's a snapshot in time. The last number that we're aware of is 29. These are, of course, special cases that are in need of services that we currently are not able to provide in the province.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I understand this correctly, currently we have 29 children from Nova Scotia that need specialized care that are currently, do we have 29 children outside the province?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Again, that would be an approximate number because more children require that type of care, and then hopefully as they leave the province they get the care and they're able to come home.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my final question to the minister on this centre, is it the intention of the department that all children that are currently outside the province in need of special care, will all those children, will they be placed in this centre? And I guess once the centre opens, I just want to find out if Nova Scotia will still have some of our children placed in homes for special care outside the province once the centre opens.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member opposite for the question because I think it's important to understand that the secure, the Wood Street Secure Care Centre is a stabilization program. The idea is that youth that are having difficulties at home or in a group home or wherever they may live can be sent there. We try to stabilize them, put some sort of plan in place that would allow them to go back to their own community. The anticipated length of stay is 30 days, but clearly that's going to vary depending on the child. It's just the nature of the service. But this is not going to eliminate the need for sending children out of the province. It will greatly assist it. It will reduce the number that have to go to the province, but it will not completely eliminate it. There are some cases that are so specialized that we just do not have a sufficient population in Nova Scotia, or probably I could say Atlantic Canada, to provide that type of specialized services for every single child. But it's a tremendous improvement over where we have been.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with the Minister. This is certainly a step in the right direction. I want to just touch on foster parents for a minute. Mr. Chairman, we've been hearing one of the key issues with foster parents is the per diem rate. We've also been hearing that recruiting foster parents in certain parts of the province is becoming increasingly difficult. My first question, is the department planning to address some of these concerns that foster parents have raised?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the member opposite for his question. It is also another critical area for the Family and Children's Services Division. It is certainly preferable in many cases to place a child in foster care rather than some sort of other accommodation. It more closely resembles the family structure, and there certainly are challenges out there for the foster parents. We are working with them. There's a new program that the member may be aware of called PRIDE, which basically encourages foster parents to take courses to improve their ability to care for the children, and accompanying that with that program, there's a compensation that comes with it for taking the course, and that is where we're directing our efforts now when working with the foster parents. But there are other challenges, and we are working with the Federation of Foster Parents to address them.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the Minister indicate how much funding is currently budgeted for foster parents, and where would you find this funding in your budget?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member. Page 4.7, maintenance of children would include that component, but I think that what the member may be getting at is that not only is it a much better form of care for many of the children in the care of the minister, but it is less costly than group homes, or certainly in the case of children with extreme behavior problems, having to send them to special facilities, sometimes out of the province, which is where the member started with this line of questioning. And I would anticipate the member might like to have a breakdown on the maintenance of children line. Do we have that here?
We don't have it here, no.
And I have asked staff to provide that breakdown.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my final question on foster parents would be how much funding is currently spent on foster parents in this year, and at the same time, is the department planning or considering putting additional funding for the foster parent program?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member. The exact breakdown will come with information from staff on the maintenance of children. But in terms of additional resources going into it, there is a commitment with the Federation of Foster Parents through the PRIDE program that does see additional monies directed towards assisting foster parents in the care of the children. But I think it's important to make the point that foster parents do this because they're special people and they care for the children. It's not intended to make it a paid occupation, but clearly it should not be at the expense of the foster parent. And I think that maybe the honourable member would agree that today the foster parents may in fact be shouldering some of the cost of the care of those children, and we're working to address this through the Federation.
The member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with the Minister. You know, Nova Scotia is truly lucky to have some caring individuals out there that have, for years and years, provided a home to many of our children in Nova Scotia. I'm sure that they have made, you know, they're not doing it for a full-time job. They're doing it, you know, because they love to work with children and certainly provide them with the needs that they have. So again, there's a number of concerns that foster parents have raised, and I'm just hoping that the department is spending some time in addressing some of these concerns. Mr. Chairman, I know my time is coming close to an end. I want to spend the next couple minutes on the National Child Benefit. On page 4.9 in the supplementary detail, this year, Mr. Chairman, Nova Scotia will be providing $30.7 million in providing child benefit to low-income families to help raise their children. My first question to the Minister, do you know how many children in Nova Scotia receive this benefit?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services. There are 4 minutes remaining in the Liberal Party's time.
I thank you, Mr. Chair. Honourable Member, I've not got that in the notes in front of me, but I'm quite certain the number is 60,000. But that's a best efforts on the part of the Minister number.
The member for Clare. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The recent stats that showed in July of 2002, a little over 60,000 children in Nova Scotia was receiving this benefit. So I'm just looking for an updated number. So anyway, if at the Minister's convenience, if he would undertake to provide us with that information. Also, Mr. Chairman, I would be interested in finding out, because it's very difficult in getting these numbers. Of course, child benefit is based on the income of the family, depending if you have one child or more. Would it be possible for the Minister to provide us with a breakdown of these benefits to families and children that are receiving the child benefit in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's a really important area, because what the member opposite is dealing with is the child poverty issue and how we're working in conjunction with the federal government to try to reduce the number of children that are living in poverty. And between, I think it was the year 1999 and 2000, there was positive movement in that area from 18.1% to 17.6%. Not good enough, Honourable Member, I'm sure you would agree, but at least it's encouraging to see that it's moving in that direction. With the incorporation of that $30,700,000 into the National Child Benefit Program with the federal government, the $30,700,000 being the Nova Scotia component, we are targeting the children in greatest need. And for any families where their household income is below $16,000, they receive the full Nova Scotia child benefit, which starts at $435 for the first child, The second child, it goes to 645, and then each child thereafter, it goes to 720. And the reason that it increases is because the Canada Child Benefit component of the National Child Benefit reduces with each subsequent child. So what we've done is we've made up the difference, because really those funds are, I would suggest, are directed for the basic necessities of life that follow the child. It costs really no more in shelter costs to have another person in the family, or if you know what I mean. It's not going to increase the heating bill, it's not going to increase the electrical bill significantly, but this is basically for food and clothing, and so we've tried to match it to that. And I'm going to sit down so the honourable member can get in one last question.
Thank you. The member for Clare has 20 seconds to wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, the minister is aware a report that was done in April of 2002 by the NSGU, caseload, overload, ready to explode. I'm just wondering, is the department doing anything to address this concern that was raised by these child protection workers?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member. In fact, I got a report on that only a couple of weeks ago, and there is a standard that we try to achieve, and we're talking about the number of caseloads per each child protection worker, and my recollection is that it's 20, and in fact we are meeting that standard.
Thank you. Time for the Liberal caucus has ended. Am I recognizing the member from Halifax Fairview?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just have two brief points that I wanted to ask the minister about. I'm not going to take much of the committee's time. The first question is, somebody said to me recently, you know, the most senior people in the department used to be social workers, and now I know the deputy minister is a lawyer, and the new associate or assistant deputy minister is a lawyer, and you're accompanied today by your finance officials, who, which is fine. I mean, this is the estimates, and I expect you to be accompanied by accountants or financial people. But I'm just wondering that, you know, now that the senior ranks of the community service department seems to be filled with lawyers and accountants, who is the most senior social worker, trained social worker in the department? And what position do they hold?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the member opposite for the question, and I guess if he'd forgive me a little indulgence, I would like to point out to the honourable member that lawyers do bring an important perspective, not only to the department but also to the legislature by times. And would the member agree? Yeah, I'm not sure that he agrees, but the honourable member is a lawyer by profession. There are a number of social workers in senior positions in the department. Tracy Williams is somebody that would be well known to the members of the legislature. Another would be Jane Fitzgerald, who occupies an absolutely critical position in the department. There are a number of senior people that are social workers within the department, and in fact I would make reference to the fact that they are focused on program delivery, where the administration and the overall management of the department, yes, we do have a lawyer for a deputy and an assistant deputy, and clearly in the finance area we're very pleased to have a CA.
The member for Halifax Fairview.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that frustrates me about the place is even the most simple questions can't get an answer. I'm going to ask the minister again. I know there are social workers in your department, Minister. My question is simple. Now, I hope the minister listens to the question carefully this time. Who is the most senior social worker in the department, and what position do they hold? I don't want a list of social workers. I want to know who is the most which social worker holds the most senior position in the department?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
The answer is that the most senior positions held by social workers are the executive directors of the department, which the honourable member would recognize are the people that are crucial to program delivery. If you want to have a breakdown of the organization chart with the exact titles, I've asked staff to provide them with same, but that is the most senior positions held by social workers, and I've given you an example of a couple of people that are crucial to the operation of those divisions.
A member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second thing that I'd like to know is in relation to the RRSS strike. One of the figures that I haven't heard from either side in the dispute is a very simple one, or should be a very simple one. It's not a state secret. I just don't have the facts that would allow me to calculate it myself. But the question is this: how much, if the department were to agree to the wage demand of the NSGEU, what would the annual cost to the department be?
Minister of Community Services.
I thank the member opposite for his question. What the NSGEU is asking for is to use a group in the healthcare sector, their choice of a group in the healthcare sector, as the comparator instead of the 5,000 people that provide care in the Community Supports for Adults program. So they want to use 32 that they have chosen in the healthcare sector instead of the 5,000 that are actually providing those services. But to answer the member's question, it amounts to about an additional 33.5% wage increase, and I can just tell them that because we fund the sector, it would have ripple effects all over the place. We're talking about over $100 million.
The member for Halifax Fairview.
Minister, it's probably unparliamentary to say stupid. That's a stupid answer.
Order.
Okay?
Order.
Okay.
Order. Order. Member for Halifax Fairview will retract that statement.
Yeah, I'll retract the word stupid and say that was a ridiculous answer, Minister. The strikers, the 240 strikers, are not asking for $100 million. I'm not asking you about the ripple effects. I'm asking you for a very straightforward question. If those 240 strikers received what they're requesting, what would be the annual cost to the department? I would just like a straightforward, factual answer to that question. What would be the cost, Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The member did not like my first answer. I explained that there would be a ripple effect right across the sector and that we'd be looking at something in excess of $100 million. He does not like the answer. He's entitled to his opinion.
Thank you. Minister, recognize the member from Halifax Fairview.
I'm sorry, another member was talking to me when the minister was giving the answer. Did the minister give a dollar figure? Minister, did you give a dollar figure just now?
Minister of Community Services.
Yes. With the ripple effect, over $100 million.
Minister, I know that you delight in not answering straightforward questions, but I'm going to ask you the question again. Without the ripple effect, just for the 240 workers, what would be the cost to your department?
The Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, honourable member. That, of course, is the point here. Number one, we are not the employer. We fund the sector. We fund the sector based on per diems. The FTE that was agreed on some 4 years ago when this came forward put $13.70 as being appropriate for the services and the training that's required by those care workers. And that is made available right across the sector, not just for the 178 people that are in the care of RRSS, but in fact the 4,900 residents right across the province. And we would do the same for them. We're committed to geographic wage equity. That was part of the agreement, and the cost would be in excess of $100 million.
The member from Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, let me do a little bit of math out loud for the minister then. Okay, here's the way I figure it. They're asking for an increase of about $5 an hour, $5 and a few cents an hour. Let's suppose a working week is 40 hours. Now, in different sectors, it can be a little more, a little less than that. So that's is an extra $5 over 40 hours is $200 a week, and call it 52 weeks a year, so about $10,000 per person. Now, there's about 240 people in the sector, which would be $2.4 million, except for one thing, and that is only about 1/3 of the workforce is full-time. The majority of the workforce, not quite 2/3 of them, is part-time, so it wouldn't actually be $2.4 million. The one fact that I'm missing that I would need to calculate how much it is how many hours are put in by the part-timers. Now, I know the minister knows that, and I know the officials sitting on either side of him know that. I know that his deputy and his assistant deputy know that, and it's not a state secret. I'm sure the union knows it, and I guess maybe I'll go and ask the union, because all I'm looking for is a dollar figure. Now, it would be $2.4 million if all of the 240 of them were working full-time, but they're not. So I'm guessing that taking into account, that 2/3 of the workforce is part-time, that is the total cost of the department would be a little bit less than $1.5 million a year. Can the minister confirm that the total cost to the department for paying these workers what they're asking for is in the neighborhood of $1.5 million a year?
Thank you for the question. Direct that to the Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've gone over this area repeatedly over the last number of weeks, but I'm going to refer to some of the answers that I gave yesterday. Back before we brought in the standardized level of care and the training expectations across the province, the average wage of the care workers was about $16,000. It went to $28,500. That represents a 78% increase. Now, with that, there were other expectations in terms of training, and I think that it was an appropriate decision to support the sector to that level. Additional monies have been put on the table. They're substantial. The member opposite knows that the union in this particular dispute with RRSS has asked for a 33.5% increase, and that you cannot just take something in isolation, that the ripple effects are considerable, and that the total cost, once you factor in the ripple effects across government, would be in excess of $100 million.
Thank you, Minister. The member from Halifax Fairview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My last question for the minister is this. Just how long are you prepared to let this strike go on?
Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is not a decision of this minister, this department, or this government. That is something to be negotiated between the employer and the union.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to recognize now the member from Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the minister. I want to thank the minister and his staff for appearing before the legislature on budget estimates, and I do know that there are many other issues that we could discuss within the Department of Community Services budget estimates, but also there are a number of other estimates that have to come before the floor as well. So having said that, thank you, Minister and staff, for your budget estimates before the House.
Thank you, member from Dartmouth North. Minister.
I want to start by saying that I concur completely with the member from Dartmouth North. I would have very much enjoyed being able to extend this for quite some considerable period of time. I would like to recognize that the NDP and the Liberal critics asked pertinent questions. They were insightful. I felt that they covered a lot of the important areas, such as time permitted, and I appreciate the way that they conducted themselves throughout the estimates. And I have a little bit of a closing statement, Mr. Chair, if very brief, and so that the next budget estimates can continue for finance. I appreciated the opportunity to review our department's budget in this forum. I am pleased to have had the chance to respond to the questions and hopefully the concerns raised during the debate. It is always important to remember that, although these are numbers on a page, they represent programs and services that have a profound impact on people and communities across Nova Scotia. I would like to thank the staff of the department, and I guess I've got to recognize Clem Henneberry and George Hudson for being here with me today and yesterday. In particular, many staff members have put many hours in developing a budget that reflects the cares and concerns of Nova Scotians. I would also like to thank the network of service providers across the province, our critical partners in delivering services to people in our community. As evidenced in our budget, we have many exciting initiatives coming in the year ahead. Our department is proud to provide programs and services that support some of our most vulnerable Nova Scotians, including children who have been neglected or abused, people with intellectual disabilities, Nova Scotians in need of safe and affordable housing, people who need support to move towards greater independence. And I would add, Mr. Chair, that the critics all recognize that and quite appropriately directed their questions, many of their questions, to those areas. Together with our partners across this province, we will continue to take steps to develop and enhance programs that meet the evolving and unique needs of our communities. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Resolution E2 and the estimates in the amount of $666,414,000 stand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your closing remarks, Minister. Shall the estimates for community services E2 stand? Stand. Thank you. Hearing that, I would like to recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I move that your committee do now rise and report progress. And we're going to finance. Oh, we're not through until 1 o'clock. Oh well. Okay. Would you please call the estimates of the Minister of Finance? I was doing well.
Government House Leader, I'll apologize for that.
Good try. You just wanted to go home early.
Well, I was actually
Order, please. Order. The committee is... Minister of Finance, are you waiting for your staff?
That's fine.
Then, the Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was a little bit confused there. The House Leader had, I thought we were going to be moving off. However, it's been said by the member for Safford-Cobequid that he's a rookie. Well, remember, if the House Leader, the member for Handswest, is a rookie, God knows what that makes me, because I tell you that much, so I must be a baby. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to be here today to present the estimates of the Department of Finance, as I also am responsible for other parts of the budget in regards of the capital spending for the government, also Nova Scotia Resources Limited, also Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation, the Municipal Finance Corporation, and I probably have a few other ones that I haven't listed here, Mr. Speaker. But when we do our resolutions, I'll do them one at a time, and I'll make sure that all members are apprised of that. Mr. Speaker, last time, and my staff are going to be joining us as I'm making my comments, and let's come around this side, though. Joining me here this morning, sorry, more in the afternoon, joining us this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, is the Deputy Minister of our department, Howard Windsor. Howard has taken over from Mr. Bill Hogg, who was my deputy for the previous 3 years, and Mr. Hogg did an exemplary job as Deputy Minister and has retired. He's an individual whose reputation is known throughout Nova Scotia and indeed throughout much of Canada. And we will miss his talents and not only in the Department of Finance but throughout government. And I'm sure that he'll serve in many different capacities to the community in his retirement. I should say his retirement, I can't imagine Mr. Hogg retiring for very long. His talents are vast, and I'm sure that many people will be asking him to contribute to Nova Scotia way of life, both in business or in the community. But we have Mr. Windsor, who has taken over the helm. He's done an excellent job in this few months that he's been there. I think he's probably lost a bit of hair since he started, but he's found the job very challenging. But I should say that he's done an excellent job in meeting that challenge. We also have on my left Ms. Elizabeth Cody, who was the Assistant Deputy Minister of the department. She used to, prior to that, she was Executive Director of the Fiscal and Economic Planning. Did I get that right? Close. I always get the title off a little bit wrong. And she's filling in as Assistant Deputy Minister of the department. She's been there for approximately 5 or 6 months, done an excellent job also. And she filled in for Mr. Ramsey Duff, who was the previous ADM, who was moved on to St. Francis Xavier University. And so, Mr. Speaker, in succession planning, I guess we couldn't have done any better. We have two very capable people who are serving the people well, and also me as minister and indeed the province. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to first of all point out that we're debating the estimates of the province of Nova Scotia, and this is the second time that I'm standing in my place defending or explaining our estimates that we have tabled a balanced budget. Now, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that when we took office in 1999, one of the reasons that we became government was due to the fact that people wanted some stability at the helm of our province, and our Premier and our party put forward a 4-year plan that was to deal with bringing about what we consider to be fiscal sanity to the operations of the province, and to allow us to make logical decisions which will have long-term benefit. And balancing the budget was the first step in that plan. And we told Nova Scotians that we would do that in 3 years, Mr. Speaker, and we achieved that last year. We're very proud as a government that we did so. And that was not without any challenges. It was a difficult process. And we found ourselves in the second stage of that, saying that we would repeat that in year 4, but we would also give income tax relief to Nova Scotians in that year. So we find ourselves in a situation that we have achieved what we set out to do. And we believe it's very important that Nova Scotia develop a reputation both to its people, but also to the many creditors who hold the debt of the province of Nova Scotia and are looking for Nova Scotia as to whether or not their trust in us and holding our bonds is justified. And hopefully the fact that we've been able to do the goals outlined in our platform will give them confidence to improve both our credit rating and also their confidence in our province that they should trust in this. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the previous year of 2002 and 2003, we tabled a budget that anticipated a $1.3 million surplus based on approximately $5.4 billion overall budget. And we ended that year with the forecasts included in the budget with a surplus of $14.5 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's approximately $13 million higher. Obviously, the books are not yet closed in last year, and that will happen early in the fall. But the situation is that we as a government said that we would manage that $1.3 million surplus throughout the year, and that we would make adjustments, if required, throughout the year based on the situation that presented itself. And we did exactly that. We indicated that we would manage that budget, and Nova Scotians could rest assured that when we finished the year that we would end in a surplus. So, where do we find ourselves this year? Well, we find ourselves with the fiscal year 2003-2004 with a budget being tabled with a surplus of $2.8 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have achieved that. And at the same time, we've increased spending to many of our critical departments, and obviously one that's in the foremost of the minds of Nova Scotians is our Department of Health. And in that department, we've increased our funding to the extent of $140 million. We've increased our spending to education, which is also a major concern to Nova Scotians, and we've increased our spending to that department to the tune of $55 million. And also, we've increased our spending to community services, and I don't have the number in front of me here, but I believe it's in $13 to $18 million in that range, and I can get that number for the members' edification. The other two I can quote a little faster. But, well, the member from Halifax Atlantic is saying that I'm doing it for their edification, but I'm doing it for your benefit. That will do it, make it a little more planning. Being French, sometimes I use these big words to explain it, but anyway, I just clarified that for the member. But we've also increased some of our other departments' spending all along government, but most of the major increases are in the 3 departments that I just outlined. Now, Mr. Speaker, this budget that we've tabled, we consider to be a very positive budget. It is all about meeting the commitments that we said in the areas that I just outlined in health and education, and also community services and transportation. but we also look at it as a budget that will grow the economy or continue the growth in the economy in Nova Scotia. And that is something which I think is very positive in the sense of where we go from today into the future. Now, not only have we increased spending in this budget, because we have done so to the tune of almost $200 million, Mr. Speaker, but we have also lowered taxes. And that is a commitment that we made to the people when we went to the polls back in 1999. And Mr. Speaker, in this budget, we are providing for income tax relief to taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, people who pay income tax. And how have we done that? Well, we've done it in two forms. The first one will be a cash refund to taxpayers who have paid income tax in the years of 2001, 2002, and 2003. And those who have paid income taxes in those years, Mr. Chairman, will receive an equal amount of a refund to the tune of $155 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, approximately 438,000 Nova Scotians will receive this refund, and the costs of this is in the tune of $68 million. Now, we believe this is very important in the sense that it'll insert cash directly into the economy. We've talked about growing the economy. We think that this will be a catalyst to continuing that growth. And that is something that we're prepared at any time to debate, and there's been some source of debate already in this legislature as to the way that we've given this income tax reduction. Now, the second part of the income tax relief is in the form of a formal change to the income tax system, which will take effect on January the 1st, 2004. And now, Mr. Chairman, we have, for people who do pay income taxes, there are three different brackets that people pay income tax on. The more money that you earn, the more brackets that you will fall within. And all three of those brackets have been affected to approximately 10%, which falls in line with the commitment that we made as a government. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are those who may say, well, why are we lowering taxes? And I've said in this House and on debate in the previous days, and I'll repeat again this day, is that we have done so to remain competitive. Now, there are those who may argue that it is not necessary to lower taxes to remain competitive, and I've had members of the opposition parties question as to whether or not that is an effective tool. But I point out, Mr. Chairman, that over the last 4 years, every province in Canada, with the exception of one, had lowered its taxes, and they had done so to remain competitive with other jurisdictions. Every single province in Canada except one. The one province who had not yet reduced their taxes, Mr. Chairman, was Nova Scotia. And the fact of the matter is that we are now in a position to do so. As we said to the people of Nova Scotia when we asked for a mandate in 1999. Now, the fact of the matter is, Mr. Chairman, you may say, well, why did we wait? Well, first of all, we told Nova Scotians that they would maintain the level of taxation at the levels that they were when we came to office until such time as we balanced the budget and we could provide that tax relief. So have we done that? The answer is yes. We maintained the income taxes for Nova Scotians at the rates that they were when we took office in July 27th, well, actually it was August 16th, 1999 when the cabinet was sworn in. And subsequent to our balancing our budget and balancing it again, we have given that tax relief. Now, we really believe that these changes are very positive. I should also mention that for people in the lower income levels, that 3,500 people who do pay taxes today will no longer pay any taxes at all because of these changes. Those people will fall off the tax rolls altogether. Of the changes that we've made in the brackets, the highest, though they're all approximately 10%, the highest reduction has been in the lower income levels, which we feel is fair. But overall, all three brackets will receive approximately 10% in their income taxes. We feel that lowering taxes is a fair, but it's also an effective way to implement a system which will ensure that our province here in Nova Scotia is competitive, especially in the Atlantic provinces, but also will grow our economy. Now, you may say, why am I so concerned with the Atlantic provinces? Mr. Chairman, I do not stand here today and tell you that Nova Scotia can be competitive such as provinces such as Alberta. That is financially unachievable for our province. But for us to remain competitive in the Atlantic provinces is very important, and that was one of the fundamental reasons whereby that we indicated that we would be lowering taxes. And there are those who may say that you only have lowered your taxes to keep the promise that you made in 1999, And I say today, as I've said in previous days, that even if the commitment wouldn't have been made in the platform, that we would be lowering taxes in this budget. Because of the fact of the matter, as I've outlined before, every jurisdiction in Canada has lowered their taxes in order to remain competitive, and we believe that it's very important. Now, Mr. Speaker, I look at even Ontario, where the ongoing program of tax reform has included personal income tax reductions of 30% since 1996. And in 1992, they said that those reductions establish a more competitive personal income tax system that is more attractive to both highly skilled workers and investors. And those are the areas, especially, Mr. Speaker, that we want to make sure that Nova Scotians are competitive, not only in attracting people to our province, but retaining the workers that we have today. I stand in this House today in the year 2003. I was elected first in 1984. Today, people are much more transient than they ever were. I have a young lady that lives in my riding that was an airline stewardess, and she went to Taipei to work. Now, I don't know how to tell you this. 19 years ago, for a young lady in my riding to say, I'm going to go work in Taipei, wasn't unheard of. Today, young people are looking at the world as being very, very much closer than it was when I first was elected. So we have to ensure that we make Nova Scotia attractive for those young people who have good skills, can find employment anywhere. And the fact of the matter, by lowering taxes, we will make Nova Scotia more competitive. That is not the only thing that will help drive the economy. Some of the other investments that we've made, and I mentioned them before, in health and education and also in roads, are all part that I consider to be a four-pronged approach to growing the economy. Stabilizing healthcare, investing in education, and especially in our community college systems, which is something that we had not made investments in for a long period of time, but also investing in our infrastructure and also tax cuts, to me, encompass a package. One by itself does not stimulate the economy, but I believe all four of them together are all part of a plan, and that is one of the reasons that we've done that. And Mr. Speaker, I talked about the fact of Alberta doing that, but just take a look in BC. Provincial income taxes were cut by about 25% by the new premier in the year 2001. That same year, Saskatchewan introduced tax cuts that it said it would lower taxes there by at least 11% in all brackets by this year. Manitoba, tax reductions amounting to $181 million annually have been recorded since 2000. And as I mentioned in this House earlier this week, they have announced another reduction in income taxes for middle income earners, Mr. Speaker. And the fact of the matter is that they're saying so because they are of the opinion that it would stimulate the economy. Those are Greg Salinger's own words. He is the NDP finance minister for the province of Nova Scotia, for the province of Manitoba. We also look at the fact that even Quebec has lowered taxes 20% since 2000. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's get closer to home. Even New Brunswick. New Brunswick has undergone an aggressive plan that includes both personal income tax reductions totaling $130 million since 1999. And that is one of the reasons that we recognized very early on, and even before going to a mandate, that we had to remain competitive and that taxes should be reduced. So let's take a look at where we're going from now. Mr. Speaker, first of all, recognizing why, as a government, why we should be prudent fiscal managers and why it was important to bring sanity to the finances of Nova Scotia, we set out on a plan. And I can say when we tabled the first budget in this House, which is basically a budget that I inherited from the former member from Lunenburg West, Don Down, we tabled here with a deficit of $500 million, Mr. Speaker, approximately $500 million. And one of the things that we didn't do as a government is say that we've looked at the books, things are different, and because of that, we have changed our plan. And I can tell you, I've probably heard that story 100 times over the years, and I know the member for Halifax Fairview, who is going to be speaking subsequent to my comments, or is listening, even he has to nod, that we've heard that many times, that people have said exactly that. We've looked at the books, and it's much worse, and because of that, we've altered our plan. I will say with great pride that our Premier, that myself as Finance Minister, and a member of our Cabinet and our caucus, did not change the direction that we set out in 1999. We did not use any excuse to sort of say we've changed the time schedule and we're going to do this in 5 years further hence. We stuck to our guns and we made difficult decisions. And I can say in all sincerity, the decisions were not easy. There were many challenges that we faced as a government and many challenges that came up on a day-to-day basis that we had to make, which were difficult. I've mentioned before in the past that we made difficult decisions, such as removing ourselves from a steel making industry in Sydney. And I can say, Mr. Speaker, that it was not an easy decision for Mr. Chairman for government to make. But I think all Nova Scotians felt that it come to the time that we've invested enough, and the fact of the matter is it was not going to change, and that we had to start focusing on the areas that we as a government wanted to invest. What is important? Is it important to be in the steelmaking industry, or is it important to provide proper health care to our children, to our people, and to our seniors? You know, or are we concerned with the education of our children and those who are older who need upgrading? Or is it important to help those who are in need, who are receiving help from social services? Well, Mr. Speaker, we made that decision. And it wasn't controversial, and we didn't get a whole lot of support from the opposition parties when we did them, Mr. Chairman. We also looked at other areas which were of a risk. And I will point out, as Minister responsible for Nova Scotia Resources Limited, we said that though NSRL was set up to be the catalyst of a gas and oil industry, that it had come to the point where there were people in this province who had deep pockets, their own money, Mr. Chairman, not the money of government, to invest in that industry. And when you're looking at investing in wells in deep water that cost sometimes $60 to $80 million, sometimes US, does government have a role to play in that? And when you're in the private sector and you drill a dry hole, you know, the advantage that they also have taxable income in other areas that they can apply those losses against and recover part of their investment. Well, I don't know if you've checked lately, Mr. Chairman, but you know, we don't have a whole lot of taxable income as a province, and we don't have those types of benefits. So the circumstances is that we said that we would move out of the gas and oil industry. And I can say that both parties opposed our decision, said that we should remain part of it, and they said probably we received very little for it. Well, you know, government actually did something right. We sold something at a time that it had value, and we received well in excess of $350 million for it, Mr. Chairman, and before its total, we'll receive close to $400 million for those assets. And Mr. Chairman, that means that that's $400 million that we don't have to borrow. That's $400 million that we didn't have to go back to the markets for. And I think that Nova Scotians now are looking at that and say, this government is controlling its risk. They're looking at the areas where there are risks, and they're removing themselves from it. And I think it's very important that we do that. Now, Mr. Speaker, in regards of my own department, I'll just try to go through a few points here. We talk about my department is made up of 6 divisions. It also has plus debt servicing, and it has a net funded staff of about 160 people. The budget for our department is $13,235,000 in net program expenditures, and it has $1 billion in debt servicing costs. I'd also point out to the members of the committee that the $1,062 million in debt servicing costs is a gross debt servicing cost. And when we talk of debt servicing costs, we speak of the net amount, and that is so that number would be net of the earnings that we make on our sinking funds, Mr. Speaker. So that means that the amount of debt servicing costs that we have for this year will be $893 million. And for the benefit of those listening, the sinking funds are funds that we provide. We invest money and we earn interest onto it. And the reason you may say, why would we invest money? That's to ensure when our issues of debt come up, that we're in a position to pay them off on time. It's very important that the province meets every time schedule for the money that it borrows. And if we don't do that, Mr. Chairman, there will be consequences, and they will be serious for the province. So we ensure that through our department that we are always in a position to pay that. Now, Mr. Chairman, I want to go back to a few comments here. The fact about growing the economy. We've talked about the fact that in this budget that we have a GDP growth of approximately 3%. It's actually 2.9 that we're using. I've been questioned on different occasions as to whether that number is reasonable. I've read different articles, even one from the Daily News, that they felt that was over-optimistic. But I will say that in our budget documentation, we have listed in there the private forecasters' estimates for the growth in our economy, and we pretty well fall in the middle of that. I look at the situation that we've received both from the upgrades from both CIBC and Scotiabank, and I think they substantiate where we are. Should point out that we're still concerned about the situation, especially in the United States. The growth there is supposed to start in the second half of 2003. That is always a concern. We're keeping an eye on that. I've been asked some questions recently as to whether or not even the SARS situation in Ontario may have an impact on the equalization that we receive. It's very early to say how long this the situation will continue. We are all very hopeful, and I'm sure all members of this House are hopeful that within a week or so that this may wrap up, and we're all praying and hoping for the many people that are involved that occurs. I'm sure for the many families that have been affected, it's been very disruptive and a lot of worry to them. And we've been very fortunate in Nova Scotia that it has not appeared in our province, and we're hopeful, and our prayers go out that will be the case going forward. Now, Mr. Speaker, I look at the changes that we've made in this budget in regards of our increases to the capital budget. I just want to touch a little bit on that. We have increased our spending in this budget to $250 million, and some of those increases are especially in the Department of Transportation and Public Works. We indicated in our platform last time that we would increase our spending in our Department of Transportation another $31 million, and we've done that over the last 3 years. And this year, an additional $11 million will be added to that. There is an additional $5 million that we have specified in regards to the bridge replacement program. I think the members of the House are all very much aware that there is a huge problem in repairing some of our bridges or replacing some of our bridges. They've been around since, I'm not sure it's Confederation, but some of them have gone back almost 100 years. And so we're undertaking to embark on a replacement program, which I think will be will serve well the people of Nova Scotia. And we've also increased our spending another $1 million, and that's in regards of the 2 cents that we put in place last year. Mr. Chairman, we said we would do that, and we would. I believe at the time it was $23.5 million that it added to the capital budget. For every 2 cents that we collected, that money went directly into the Department of Transportation and Public Works. And what happened there, Mr. Chairman, is that money went all towards repairing and building our roads. We gave a commitment to Nova Scotia that all the money would go. In this budget, there was an additional of $1 million, and that's the adjustment as to what we actually collected versus what we paid. And so that makes up the increases that we have in regards of the transportation budget. There was a substantial amount being spent in our Department of Education in regards of school replacements and major alterations. I believe it's in the vicinity of $80 million. And Mr. Chairman, I should point out that there is a lot of work to do in this area. The list is long. We've been working very closely with the regional school boards to identify their priorities. I should point out that the list is longer than what we've provided for in this year, but we are making progress, and we will continue to work closely with the school boards to make sure that we can move this agenda forward. The list, I think 2 years ago, the deficiency list to fix it would have been somewhere in the vicinity of $500 million. So, Mr. Chairman, I should point out that there are still schools which will not be built this year, that there will be some disappointment. But I really want to point out again that we are making progress, and we are moving forward onto them. And many of the most pressing schools that we required will be advanced this year, and as the Minister of Education will be making that list available relatively shortly as to where we're going. And I've caught the attention of some of the members on the other side, and that's very good. So, Speaker, overall, I should say that there's been a few changes in the department. I just want to point out, just for the members' information, that the Human Resources function has been transferred to the department from the Public Service Commission, and the employees associated with this system will be working in the Corporate Information Systems branch. And this group will be a valued resource in the implementation of the SAP Human Resources Net Pay module. And that is something that we're rolling out within government, but we're also working with many of our outside partners, and I refer to school boards. We're working closely with them to implement the SAP. And also we have some municipalities which are also involved into that. Mr. Chairman, those are some of the brief comments I'd like to make in opening up. And I do know that we're moving closer to the end of estimates, and I'll more than willing to entertain questions from the members opposite.
Thank you, Minister. I'll recognize the official opposition, the member from Halifax Fairview, with 1 hour on this new resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I believe I'm right in saying that we have something in the order of 31 minutes left today. Okay. Minister, I'd like to start with an item that I'm having trouble finding in this year's estimates book. I'm sure it's there somewhere. I just need some help finding it, and that is the what in previous years has been referred to as restructuring. I wonder if you could point out where in the estimates book the restructuring line item is this year, please.
The Minister of Finance.
Chairman, restructuring is in page 1.7 of the estimates, and it would be in this year. Just 1 second here. I'm showing here on page 1.7 of the estimates. I will try to endeavor to get a little more reference to it and to the member. I'm showing here 21,624,000.
Excuse me, to announce you, the member from Halifax Fairview.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really did mean that as a genuine question. I just wasn't sure where it was. So the minister's helped me find it. Now, what restructuring covers, among other things, is provision for contract negotiations, like the negotiation that's going on right now with the Regional Residential Services Society. So $24.9 million has been set aside for, among other things, government-wide negotiations of collective agreements. Does the minister have an estimate of how much it would cost to settle the RRSS strike?
The Minister of Finance.
Chairman, in regards of the specific item, I would not have that estimate. Perhaps, obviously, I think first of all, for us to be saying how much we feel that it would take to settle the strike would not be appropriate for me to be speculating onto it. Obviously, we are involved in negotiations. The provisions that are put into the estimate books are for restructuring for contracts which will come up in this year. In the past, I've been asked questions by members opposite as to the breakdown of the restructuring, and we've always been the position that the restructuring account is not broken down because it is made up of different issues or different items which are in there, and to divulge that, first of all, would indicate to parties who would be negotiating with the province exactly how much we have put aside for negotiations, which basically would not be in the interest of the province of Nova Scotia. As to how much specifically it would take to resolve the one negotiation which is currently around the House, because they've been here for some time and was some concern. I think, if I remember correctly, I was listening to the Minister of Community Services earlier on. I believe that part of the problem that he was indicating is that this is not a one standalone negotiation, that oftentimes what will be settled here will have impacts in other types of negotiations that are going on. But I'm not as well informed as the Minister of Community Services is, or even the Minister of Public Service. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's about as much as I could shed light on this issue.
Thank you, Minister. Recognize the member, Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, when the Minister of Community Services was speaking, I put the figure out to him of $1.5 million, because although he treated it like a state secret, the actual amount that would cost to settle on the union's terms, which may or may not happen, of course, it just simply depends on the wages that are being asked for times the number of hours that the workers work. And the only reason that we're not able to calculate that ourselves is that 2/3 of that particular workforce is part-time, and we don't have the information on the total number of hours that they work. But I would suggest to the Minister, I did suggest to the Minister of Community Services that $1.5 million per year would do it, and he didn't disagree with me, although that particular minister, not this one, but that particular minister takes a perverse delight in not answering straightforward questions. But I would suggest to this minister that if this particular strike is settled, for whatever amount it is settled, it's the restructuring fund that it would come out of, and that there is many, many times more than enough money in there to settle it if the government chose. Now, the minister stood up and said it's under negotiation, but I would point out to him that it's precisely not under negotiation. That's the problem. it's not being negotiated. Nobody is talking to anybody, but the money is there. Another item, Mr. Speaker, that I had difficulty finding this year, although the minister claims that it's still there, is the item that in former years was referred to as the provision for doubtful accounts, which was formerly a standalone line item, and as far as I can tell this year is not. So my question to the minister, where is that item in this year's budget?
Thank you for the question, and direct that to the Minister of Finance.
Chairman, when my staff are getting the pages out, it is in there. And part of the reason that the member opposite is saying that it's a little more difficult to find is that there has been a change. One of the changes that we moved from the Office of Economic Development, or the Department of Economic Development, to a new format, which is called Nova Scotia Business Inc., and also the Office of Economic Development, which is now its department is reported under the public sector, public service vote, and so it is confusing in that sense. Now, Mr. Chairman, in regards of Nova Scotia Business Inc., there has been provisions made in this year's budget of $2 million, and in the Office of Economic Development, there has been provisions made of approximately $500,000. Collectively for the province as a whole with other departments, and I should point out that there are other lending agencies such as the Farm Loan Board and also the Fisheries Loan Board, and we also have even like housing development, whereby we're providing some financing to low-income families and so forth. And I think the total is in the vicinity of about $3.4 million that we made provisions for in this budget. But I appreciate the member opposite saying that it is difficult sometimes to find it. We will get the pages out and I'll refer them to them. I anticipate that the member has found it for the Office of Economic Development. Am I correct in that? All right, we'll find those pages for them, and I'll list them, and then we'll go through them one at a time. I should point out, in regards of the employees, going back to this previous question that he was referring to, the employees that are having negotiations are not provincial employees; they are employees of an entity. I don't disagree that the province obviously is involved with it, because obviously the province is a funding agency. But I should point out that the concerns that were brought up by the Minister for Community Services is that obviously to look at any one series of negotiations in isolation is probably not the way to do it. There are many different organizations which will be coming forward also. So the fact of the matter is that this negotiation may have impacts on other negotiations that are going forward, and that may lend itself to where the minister was referring to the magnitude of it being higher than the approximately $1 million that the member for Halifax Fairview was quoting. But I want to say that I'm not fully briefed on this issue, but I'm just pointing that out for the members' information. So I'll get those pages from you. It shouldn't take that difficult to get them down.
Thank you, Minister. The member, Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I look forward to getting those page numbers, because searching by hand, searching electronically, I couldn't find that line item in this year's estimates book. It has disappeared. Now, it's been a bit embarrassing to the minister in the past, and I don't blame him necessarily for removing an item that in the past has been embarrassing to him, but I don't think he's heard the last of it, because it's going to be embarrassing to him again, or whoever the next finance minister happens to be, because of the very large loss on account of Orenda in Debert. Now, this is a company that the government, first the Liberal government and then the Conservative government, said was doing just great. It was doing just great. And whenever any questions were raised about it, even though they said they were going to create over 100 jobs, and the local paper up there was able to point out that at any given time there were no more than half a dozen cars in the parking lot, the government always said, it's just a great company, it's just about to turn the corner, it's just about to turn the corner, even after it appears the government knew that that was no longer the case. We had the spectacle of the Minister of Economic Development praising the company 4 weeks after it had shut down production. So either the minister didn't know something that he should have been informed of, or he knew what was really happening and said the opposite thing. Either way, we've got a problem. So this minister's got a problem with the provision for doubtful accounts, and I don't blame him for removing it completely from this year's estimates books. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move from the past events of Orenda to an event reported in today's paper, which is somewhat disturbing for us. It appears that the Parti Québécois government, or the former PQ government, came into some information from the federal government in the midst of their recent election campaign and chose not to report it to the public, even though it had a very significant impact on the provincial finances, anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion. They were informed they were going to see a reduction in federal transfer payments, and the PQ government chose not to report that to the people of Quebec. And in today's papers, they're giving all kinds of excuses about why they thought they didn't need to report it, but nevertheless, it's a fact. So my question to the minister is the minister aware today of any information, any advice of any kind from the federal government indicating that Nova Scotia will receive less money in transfer payments than is forecast in this year's budget documents?
Thank you for the question. The Minister of Finance.
Chairman, before I answer that question, I do have some notes coming down from our staff that talk about the two different provisions. Nova Scotia Business Inc. apparently has been provided on page 1513, and economic development is being provided for on page 1516. I don't have my estimate book here in front of me, and I'll, if you refer to those two pages, that will give you the breakdown of the $2 million and the $500,000. If it's not, I will double check that with staff and go through it. But that should give you the two provisions that I referred to specifically. 1513 and 1516. Do you see them there? Okay. All right. Well, I'll get the details of my staff. Send me down this note, then I have no reason to go. But we'll go through them. Mr. Chairman, in regards of the second question that was brought forward by the member for Halifax Fairview, the situation in regards of Quebec is in regards of the census report that was put out in 2001. Quebec has had a depopulation and has a control, has I guess in a sense, a difficulty in that regard. I should point out that the census is not yet finalized. Those numbers will only probably be finalized in regards of, and perhaps a little later on in the fall. The information is coming forward bit by bit. I should point out that the initial, when the last census came forward, that we had a show, and that would have been 1997? Yeah, 1997, that our numbers originally showed that Nova Scotia had a small decrease in its population, and when the final adjustments came through, basically they came up. In this series of census that we've just received, our initial numbers show that our population in Nova Scotia has decreased slightly, and our anticipation is that when we get our final numbers, they will be comparable to what happened in 1997, and our population will basically be level what it was in 1997. The situation in Quebec is a little different situation, and I do realize that they've been concerned in regards to this. There's two things that are going on. First of all, the federal government has not indicated how they're going to be treating the situation in regards of a decrease in population in regards of the census. I should point out there are provinces, especially in Canada, and I'll point to a very specific province which is located very close to Nova Scotia, and that's especially Newfoundland and Labrador, where we've had a huge out-migration of people, and they've been concerned with the long-term effects of the depopulation in regards of equalization as it refers to Newfoundland. The federal government, as of yet, has not made a determination as to how they're going to be handling the changes in census, as to whether or not they will make any adjustments retroactive or whether they will go forward. That information will be known a little later on. So in regards of our budget, we're comfortable with the numbers that are going forward, but probably the final changes in regards of the census won't be known until the fall. But I should point out in regards of Quebec, the problem in Quebec, especially with their numbers, is that they're concerned with the initial census reports that they've received and how that may affect their equalization, especially on a go-forward basis.
Thank you, Minister. Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to the provision for doubtful accounts, the page references that you gave me, Minister, for example, page 15.13 is just one number for Nova Scotia Business Inc. And I have no doubt that somewhere buried in the $29,215,000 is a provision for doubtful accounts. My point being only that that line item, which used to be in the budget, has disappeared from the budget documents. And I have no doubt that it's somewhere else in NSBI's documents, but it's not in the documents given here. And the same goes for the reference on page 15.16. But we'll leave that aside for now, and I'm sure the minister can provide those items and which agencies have provision for doubtful accounts. I'm simply expressing a concern that that item, which has proven to be embarrassing to the government in the past, has been dropped entirely. I'm not saying there is no provision for doubtful accounts. Clearly there is. What I'm saying is it's been dropped from the budget documents given to this legislature. Now, I'd like to move back to this problem that Quebec is facing now, and I would like, if I may be permitted, Mr. Chairman, to read 2 sentences from today's Globe and Mail. And my question is going to be to the Minister, did something similar happen with respect to Nova Scotia? So from today's Globe and Mail, page 8, it says the following, quote, "At the end of March, in the middle of the provincial campaign, the federal government advised Finance Minister Pauline Marois that Quebec would be getting much less than expected in equalization and transfer payments. In her pre-election budget, tabled March 11th, Ms. Marois had projected that Quebec would receive an extra $788 million from Ottawa for the 2003-2004 fiscal year, but instead Quebec was told it would receive $294 million less, leaving a $1.08 billion shortfall." So my question to the Minister, and hanging around politics for a while has given me a good training in reading between the lines. Has Ottawa informed Nova Scotia of a change in population that will impact on federal transfer payments, or has it not? Yes or no?
The Minister of Finance.
Member, Mr. Chairman, in regards of the March 27th supposed notification that came through, we have not been notified that our equalization will be going down. I should point out that the census has, and the final numbers may have an impact on revenues of the province. I should point out that is the case. There is also a determination yet to be made by the federal government in regards of how they will treat especially provinces who have had huge depopulation problems, and I've referred to Newfoundland and Labrador especially, that they are the most severe province that is being affected by it, and also the province of Quebec. I can't understand why their numbers would have gone up $780 million in this year, and basically you're saying, I'm not privy to all that information. I'm surprised the member said that they were going up that much. I do know in this year overall, our from forecast to forecast, our equalization basically is actually going down from last year, from estimate to estimate, because we had anticipated $1.3 billion in equalization last year, $1,320 million, and this year we're anticipating almost $80 million less than that. And one of the reasons that that is occurring is that our economy is doing better. To go back to specifics in regards of Quebec, it's not really probably appropriate for me to speculate as to what's going on in that regard. I do know that our population by the census is anticipated, when we have the final numbers coming in, to be relatively stable with our previous one. As to whether or not that will have some impact on equalization in this year, it is early to tell, because we don't know, first of all, how Ottawa will react to the examples that I've given you, and they may very well react different. And also, I should point out that equalization is not only made up of census, it is also made up of about another, literally hundreds of different variables which go into it. And part of the problem that we have is estimating the amount of equalization that we should receive. The member opposite brings up a good point that census results or outcomes may potentially have an impact on the amount of equalization that we have. And as such, if there are adjustments there, we'll have to treat it. But we're not aware of the situation in regards to similar to Quebec. Now, go back to the previous question that you asked. I just want to clarify, you're saying why we didn't divulge the information. I just want to point out that since we've made the changes to the Department of Economic Development, that now it is Nova Scotia Business Inc., which is an entity which is under the direction of an independent board, Mr. Chairman, and we have the Office of Economic Development. They are no longer departments. They are now public sector votes, and as such, they don't receive the level of detail that they did as when they were departments. So the member opposite is correct that the information that was present there before, that you could look at and you could see the line and say, how much have you provided for allowances in this year perhaps of bad debts, you could have seen that line. The fact of the matter that the departments have changed their format, and because of that, they're no longer in the same format, and it is more difficult for the member opposite to find that level of detail. And he will Obviously, you will have to ask specifics of how much in that number is included in that for provision for doubtful accounts. I have indicated within the Department of Economic Development, it is $500,000, and within the Nova Scotia Business Inc., it is $2 million. And those are the specifics in regards of those two different entities as to what provisions have been made in the budget that I tabled in the spring.
The member from Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back on the issue of federal transfer payments, it really worries me when I hear the minister splitting hairs, which I feel that he's doing today. I feel that my antenna are tingling and on this one, and I hear the minister kind of splitting hairs on the specific words that I choose to ask the question and saying, well, no, it didn't happen exactly that way. What I appear to be hearing, if I read between the lines, is that yes, indeed, Nova Scotia has been advised of certain census figures that show a slight drop in Nova Scotia's population. And that yes, indeed, if final census figures confirm that drop, there will be an impact on federal transfer payments. But because those figures haven't been finally confirmed, the minister is not going to say what that drop is anticipated to be, although the very same information the minister has is becoming the first scan